Printing money is bad,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's inflationary.
Mm-hmm.
But borrowing printed money is insane. They issued United States notes. Remember that Title 31, Section
I don't
5115?
remember that. No.
Okay, write it down. Title
Well,
31,
hold
Section
on, hold on.
5,
Title 31, Section,
5115.
and that is what?
Well, it's been repealed by the Community Redevelopment Act, but it essentially gave the president the power to put about $200 million worth of United States notes, IOUs, directly into circulation, interest free.
Oh, is that from the USC?
Yes, USC, Title
Title
31.
31. So it said the president could do just what John Kennedy wanted to do and what Ike, well, John Kennedy did do it, and then Ike did do it to do the highway.
That's right.
He issued their own notes.
Yeah, John Kennedy went a little further than Ike, though.
Yeah, got him into trouble, too, you know.
Yeah, he did. He ordered the Treasury to look in the vaults, and
Yeah.
anything you have that's a silver dollar, silver quarter,
Yeah.
silver.
See what you got down there, guys.
Yeah, and if there are no silver certificates, in other words, these things are just sitting in a vault, and there's no silver certificates issued against them.
Let's go ahead, yeah.
Yeah, issue some silver certificates against
Good
them.
for John.
Later on, Richard Nixon sold those things, of course, through the GSA.
But now,
When Kennedy was in office, he ordered the Secretary of the Treasury to, start issuing silver certificates against the silver that we had in reserve.
and it was about 300 million, right?
Yeah. Between that and the U.S. note issue, it would have negated his need to borrow any money from the Federal Reserve, and they were not happy about that.
No, wait. I lost you. I missed a piece. John Kennedy said, we got the silver, so let's do U.S. notes.
Yeah, well, he came into office, if you recall, with this great idea, right? The Peace Corps,
Sure,
remember?
sure.
Right? We're going to put a man on the moon,
Sure. Yeah,
remember?
we're going to do all this
And
stuff.
we're going to do all this stuff,
Right.
and the boys at the Fed were going, oh, man, we love this guy.
Yeah, because they're going to borrow money from us.
Yeah, he's gonna have to get at least $500 million, and we can do that.
That was
and
a lot of money back then.
create it and loan it to him, and that would just be wonderful. And instead, he says, oh, no, thanks, but no thanks.
Wow.
If you're Treasury Secretary, here's what I need you to do.
Uh-huh.
I need you to count all the silver in the vaults and issue silver certificates against it,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
max out on the U.S. notes. However many we can issue according to the statutory limit, get it into circulation right away.
Wow. So what was the statutory limit?
200 million for the U.S. notes, and approximately
200 per year?
200 million in total. Once they were paid back into the Treasury, he could recirculate them. But the ongoing policy of the Treasury to simply retire them as they were paid in, that was reversed.
So let me see if I can understand. So John F. Kennedy's Treasury guy, which by the way was named Lincoln. Do you know that?
That was his secretary.
So, Secretary of Treasury, right? Okay. So they print up United States notes, and they would buy stuff with them, right? The actual note. How did they get into circulation?
Just spend it. Spend it. Pay a bill with it. That's what it was
But
used
you wouldn't
for.
pay a bill with cash.
Well, no, but you would get those into circulation in any way possible, mostly from the delivery of something or the requirement
And
to pay
they would
something.
get into the bank somehow.
They would get into the banking system
I see.
in the form.
So then what happens when the banks would get them back? They would
They
give
would-
them back to the Treasury?
And retire them, yeah.
Oh,
So when they were paid back into the Treasury in the form of taxes or in the form
whatever.
of some other obligation, then they were simply canceled, eliminated from circulation.
just burned them or something.
Essentially, yeah.
And then in according to Title 31, you could do that. You could do that again.
Yeah, you could keep up to 200 million in circulation.
Oh, I see. Wow.
Yeah,
And then he did 300 million with the silver, right?
correct.
So the boys didn't like
Roughly. No, they didn't like it. It eliminated his need to
Ah.
borrow anything from the Fed
Uh-huh.
to do the stuff he wanted to do.
So some people conjecture, of course, and you've been a student of JFK's
Yeah.
murder for a long time. I know you.
Yeah.
That this is part of the reason why Mr. Kennedy was murdered 55 years ago.
Well, I'm also a student of the law,
Yeah.
and what the lawyers do, and policemen do it to a certain extent, detectives, when they look at motive means, and opportunity. You know, who
Yeah.
who would benefit, key bono, I think it is,
Yeah.
in
Who would
who's
benefit?
going to benefit from this.
Yeah.
And when you, in hindsight now, obviously at the time it might not have been so clear, but in hindsight, when you combine those three things, means, motive, and opportunity,
Whoops.
you can only come to one conclusion. What do they call it now? The deep state. You know, what did they call it then?
Black Ops.
Military-industrial complex. I don't know.
Now it's called the deep state.
Well, yeah.
And then, of course, Bobby Kennedy's brother was on record very
Oh yeah.
bullish on the idea of dismantling the CIA.
Oh yeah.
And then
So was John. Of course, he, you know, that oh doggone it, Security Action Memo, which he signed, which was pulling us out of Vietnam, and
yes, kind of pulling out of it, which the military-industrial complex was not happy about.
hated.
And then Hoover, FBI guy, hated John, and John hated him because he had pics on John, you know, with girls. And so that was a relationship. And so Hoover, so that's why people conjecture, and all the books are written, how do you, that the CIA, the FBI, the deep state,
Well, here's
and the mob were all involved.
here's my number one piece of evidence, okay? And it came from a gentleman that I spoke to in person, looked him in the eye, and his name is Robert Groden, Groden.
I've seen this fellow before.
And he was hired by the Select Assassination Committee. You remember the second committee, not the first one, the House? They did the Warren report, and then by this early 70s, man,
Somebody said, we got to have an investigation.
we just weren't buying it. So the House Select Committee on Assassinations, of which Hillary Clinton was counsel, decided to...
good for Hill.
Yeah, okay. Decided to dig into this, and Gerald Ford was there, of course, to do his...
Yeah.
Okay, so and Robert Groden was sent as their photography expert. That's all that he was. Their photography expert.
The deep state's photography expert?
No, the Select Committee.
Oh, the committee's expert.
Assassinations.
Okay.
He was their photography expert.
Okay.
They sent him to the National Archives to see the assassination photos himself.
Yeah.
And to report back to them what he found.
Yeah.
The only first person outside of government to see those photos since they were taken, the autopsy photographs.
The real deal. When they arrived in, was it in
Bethesda,
in
Maryland.
Dallas, or when he arrived in Bethesda?
Maryland.
Right.
They took pictures of the body, of the wounds, everything, an autopsy set of photographs for those of you out there who know what that means.
Yeah.
And Groden said it was the most afraid he ever was in his entire life when he realized that the photographs were faked. And so then the implication was, who would have the power to do that? And he realized that it had to be those in the highest levels of government. There was no one else that had the power to alter these photographs and then put them in the National Archives, where they sat unmolested until he looked at them. So that to me was the best evidence, and I think in fact that's what Lifton called it in his book, the best evidence. There's just no one else could have possibly touched those photographs.
And they would be faked because the real photographs
the occipital would have
proven that there was shots coming from everywhere.
That's exactly
all
right.
over the place, and not just one from the
one
behind,
shot in the throat, and then his head mostly intact, and
so the whole single bullet, or the one-man theory, was just blown
to hell by the autopsy photographs.
Wow.
That's right. And the idea that he was shot from the back as opposed to from the front, which any marksman will tell you, that it's the exit wound that does the damage. If he would have been shot in the back, from the back, the front of his head would have come apart, but instead he was shot from the front, and so the back of his head, the occipital region, is what Jackie Kennedy was climbing onto the back of the limo to grab when Clint Hill forced her back into the car.
So then he reported that to the Select Committee.
Yes, he
did.
did.
And then what did they say?
Well, they said nothing. They said, the cover-up continues, because that's essentially what happened. But the church committee at about the same time did reveal for the first time to the American people the existence of what they called, and we've been using this name since Deep State came, before Deep State came out, the shadow government. And
Right.
the church committee revealed to the American people that, hey, within government, there is a shadow government that operates outside of the light of day. And they're the ones that put these various assassinations, because it wasn't just the Kennedy, it was Martin Luther King. And I mean,
Sure.
by this time,
Sure. Yeah.
the idea that the deep state had assassinated Robert Kennedy, Bobby Kennedy, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X. I mean, the list was starting to get cumbersome. So American people wanted answers. Church committee gave it to them. But just like the people that tell me we're going to audit the Fed, you could go back now and read some of the revelations of the church committee and the House Select Committee on Assassinations. And this is source material, folks. And back in those days, you didn't have the internet. What you had was reporters like Rachel Maddow with their predisposed opinions, finding evidence to support those opinions. And so the American people were told there was an investigation, and they looked, and yeah, there's these things, but we're not going to worry about it. We're moving on. And that's what we did. But if you today were to pretend that the House Select Committee on Assassinations was underway right now, and their reports were available for Americans to read, and they read them, they would absolutely be livid at the prospects of what's happening in government today.